Welcome once again to St. Louis. I'm your host, George Blaze. We've started a new year here, and yet the stresses we've gone through over the past year haven't seemed to have gotten away, but it seems that there's a little light at the end of the tunnel. Different things are happening with the COVID vaccine being distributed, but things aren't going necessarily according to the plans we were given. There's a new administration in the White House here. People are excited about that, but even things going on that end aren't all that everything thought it was cracked up to be. But the main thing is to try to keep some sense of self, to try to keep a level head, to make sure that what's going on inside and internally that we're taking care of. And in the Black community in particular, there's a huge stigma around mental health and mental health awareness and care. And we want to punch through that and make sure everybody gets an understanding of some of the things we need to be aware of and the things we need to do. Joining me now is Ajuma Muhammad. He is a licensed psychotherapist, author, motivator, lecturer, and diversity trainer. Ajuma, it's taken a long time for me to get you, but I really appreciate you being here today.
Yes, sir. I am honored to be here, George, and I pray that God will bless my tongue in the next few moments that we have to hopefully say something that will inspire, educate, and motivate people to move to an entirely different space and place in their life.
And that's the work you do every day. It's been, I've said this 1,000 times over the past couple of months, but it's been a rough year. It's been a rough year for a lot of people. Now coming into 2021, people have kind of done an internal reset of their clock, hoping that things will get better. We're still dealing with this COVID situation. Is bad in the Black community. We're still dealing with violence in the streets amongst our young people. I guess I want to start there because that's one of these issues here in the St. Louis area that kind of gets swept under the rug with the whole COVID thing that was going on, is that our young people are still out here. Violence is still out here. What is the temperature in your mind with our young people in the St. Louis area?
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head. Our young people are certainly out of control, but I always say that our young people are a byproduct of their parents. Parents are out of control, and because of their poor examples, in many instances, in many cases, it's just a residual effect or trickle down effect. So I think when parents begin to demonstrate a more positive example, keep the lines of communication open, teach their children life skills, survival skills, common sense kind of skills, then it creates a different paradigm, a different result.
Certainly, when I was growing up, I'm a kid of the 70s and 80s. My parents looked at me like I was out of my mind. Is this not a normal generational thing where one generation is always going to reject the younger generation's choices?
I think there's some truth to that. However, because the climate is different, it's so much different. We're in the era of social media, where social media greatly adversely, in many cases, affects our mental outlook on life. We didn't have to contend with social media the way that we do now. Small children can get access to a telephone and computer, and they can go in many places where they don't necessarily need to be, particularly without proper supervision. I have young people 6 and 7 years of age, 8 years of age that are on porn sites or adult sites or on the kind of sites that they really don't need to be. And so when certain ideas get suggested to them, a lot of times they want to explore those ideas even further. And it compromises their ability to stay focused and do the things they need to do, particularly as a kid. A lot of times kids are not kids anymore. They have ventured into the area of adult issues, and so it impacts them greatly.
I'm certain it's one of the things that you've written about extensively, particularly when we're talking about young Black males, is that growing up in a household where now you're the man of the house, but you're not even a man yourself, and how that can be confusing in combination with being raised by a single female. For a young adolescent Black male, there's some mixed messages going on and some leadership and some other things that they're not getting. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of the intact family structure and what role that plays, particularly in the lives of young Black males.
Well, family is the foundation. I've been blessed to go to 60 different countries throughout the world. I've been to China, been to Africa, and the family is the foundation. Um, there's a statistic that says 70% of Black families are being raised by the single parent. That is, when you take in consideration the economic adverse impact on women and trying to raise children alone as a single parent, that's pretty traumatizing. It's pretty devastating, and it's very, very difficult emotionally, socially, psychologically, and certainly financially. And so having two parents in the house, it helps to kind of create a sense of balance, the yin and the yang, so to speak. So that's imperative to have two parents in the home. Now, you said something, George, that I want to just expound on briefly. Sometimes you can have two parents in the home and it creates a lot of chaos, particularly if parents are not on the same sheet of music, so to speak, in terms of child development, child rearing, child discipline, just in the way that the child should go. So I've seen two-parent households uh, um, um, be very difficult in a lot of respects because they present mixed messaging or mixed messages to the children. So sometimes that can be very problematic as well. But ideally, when you have two parents in the home, it's a much better situation because it gives the other parent a sense of relief.
I've heard several people say that there's as much an impact in terms of the financial achievement for women in terms of the disparities in education and job opportunities. There's as much an impact in the choices some women make in their lives. Bringing the wrong man into your life or bringing the wrong woman into your life, as you're saying, can have as much of a detrimental effect on your ability to
Absolutely.
make a living.
Absolutely, absolutely. When you have mixed messaging in the house, sometimes women tend to be the disciplinarian, and men tend to be more passive. And so it's very important that during that courtship period, that we really kind of get a deeper understanding of what we're walking into, and not let it just be a feel good moment. I think before people get married, they should definitely do marital therapy. It's critical. They say 50 to 60% of the marriages in America end up in divorce. I think because most of us don't have a foundation in terms of what we're really walking into and the responsibility associated with it. It tends to lean more towards getting a divorce. So that piece is absolutely essential. You think about it, we go to school, we learn about science, math, whatever your particular subject is. But what do we learn about human dynamics? What do we learn about relationships? What do we learn about conflict mediation and how to be the bigger person, the bigger man, the bigger woman? All of those things are critical, imperative, important, particularly when you're bringing children in the world. And so when they get those mixed messages, it can be very concerning and very confusing to them as well.
In speaking about mental health issues, particularly in regards to our young people in the community, it's been my experience through watching some of my friends or my peers' children, what they've gone through, that physicians in particular are sometimes very quick to put very young people on different mood stabilizers, SSRIs, using pharmacology to solve the problem. I wonder if you could share a little bit of maybe your thoughts, your philosophy on when the right time is to consider that and when it's just being done too much.
Well, I think it's certainly out of control. I think it's certainly being done too much. And I think that is an excellent question. The question should be asked is that the majority of children in America today, black children, white children, they spend an inordinate and an enormous amount of time playing video games or either on a cellular phone. They spend the majority of their time. I've had clients that spend uh, 20 to 23 hours a day playing video games 7 days a week. And the interesting thing or the irony in all of it is they are 100% engaged, focused, clear, concise. So the question should be asked, how can you, if you label with a clinical diagnosis of ADD, which stands for attention deficit disorder, how can you focus on a video game or cell phone 23 hours a day, but you can't focus on a book or schoolwork or your schoolwork or stay attentive to a subject that requires you to stay focused? How can it be? So that's why I say loosely is certainly out of control, is certainly overdiagnosed. Yes, we do have children that have difficulty sustaining their focus, but I think environmentally, structurally, and developmentally, if they were raised differently or reared differently or socialized differently, it would help. It would help to maintain that level of sustainability and focus when it came time to learning things that presented a level of difficulty. And so, I see cellular phones and video games as kryptonite in this day and age. I had alluded to social media earlier. It's kryptonite. It's absolute kryptonite. Children get introduced to a world that they're not mature enough to really understand because they have cell phones and video games that become the new pacifier, what I call pacifier trinkets that parents give the children so that they don't have to socially engage them or intellectually converse with them. And so a great deal, majority of the time, is spent playing video games and being on cell phones. It's interesting that a lot of the children that I talk to can't even complete a sentence, can't have a decent civil conversation with you because they're so used to providing one word answers. In this day and age, many African Americans, we have greater resources, more money, bigger homes, more cars, but our children are intellectually deficient. Why? One, because they don't know who they are, and two, we're not stimulating their minds to better understand their history, their culture, their proud history, and their proud culture from whence they come, which could serve as motivation as well. So the whole structurally things are off, um, and I see it as being a real big problem, particularly for Black males and the African American community.
Well, we're coming up on just about a year now for many major cities and urban areas across the country where children have been locked into their laptops and their screens, not able to attend school. The isolation of that clearly has an impact on everyone involved. It has an impact on me working from home. I can't imagine what it must be like for certain kids going through certain phases of adolescence to be completely isolated from their friends in that way, to have to deal with the pressures of being at home, perhaps in a household where it's not very supportive, perhaps in a household where it's abusive, and now they're trapped there because they can't go to school. Talk to us a little bit about there's got to be a wave or something that's going to come out of this that we have not seen yet.
Well, your questions are very timely and very on point. You know, my opinion of that is that we can't have it both ways. Now, what does that mean? Before the pandemic, I thought children were socially isolated. Now, what does that mean? A great deal of children don't really communicate with adults. They don't necessarily communicate with their peers. They text, they live on the telephones, and so they're really socially isolated. When children go to parties, they don't go and actually dance and have a good time. They go and they spend time on the cell phone. It's like, wow, why would you even go to the party if you're not going to socially engage your peers? Everybody is addicted to these cell phones now, and it really has aided or exacerbated their detriment or their decline. So they're really really problematic. Even when children were going to school, they had some engagement in interaction with their peers. But again, they're still socially isolated. We're in a whole different era now where children don't really communicate. I'll give you a perfect example. The subdivision that I live in, um, uh, every day, I never see children riding bikes, walking down the street, dribbling the basketball, or playing with one another. So one morning I was leaving the house and I saw a ton of children getting ready to catch a school bus, and I thought to myself, "Wow, where did all these kids come from? I never see them." Well, in this modern era, children don't come out of the house and they don't play. They live on the computer, they live on cell phones, or they play video games. So they have been socially engineered, consciously and unconsciously, to isolate themselves. You know, so that's a real problem. That's a real big problem. So now, since children are in home, everything is taking place virtually. Well, they were on the phone virtually prior to the pandemic, and now because this new virtual reality requires them to have to focus, study, concentrate, they don't like it. And so that's why I say you can't have it both ways. Either you're going to have it one way or you're going to have it the other way. And yes, I do recognize children do get, you know, burned out from being at home, but they were at home before the pandemic. Now they don't necessarily like the idea of their parents supervising them, and now the parents have to engage them in a different kind of way because they see how hard it is for children to stay focused or their particular child to stay focused. Now they have to deal with it, so it's definitely problematic. People are adjusting and adapting, but it is a problem. So, you know, that's where
I
we
like the way
are.
you put that. You can't have it both ways. You said it very well there. We have to really decide on what the priorities are and what is it that we're being critical of. Is it critical of the decisions being made in a public policy spectrum to try and keep people's health safe, or are we talking about a problem in society in general, where we're all adults and children alike isolating ourselves? I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting on the couch next to my wife and we're not talking, and we're both working or doing stuff, and we haven't talked for 40 minutes, and we're sitting right next to each other. So I think you're
Hmm.
absolutely on, right about that. People have to really pay attention and really put a limit on the time. Screen time is one of those things that's so important, particularly when we're talking about your young people. Really monitoring and being severe about that screen time, and sometimes being like, you know what, get up and run around the block and come back in half an hour because you can't just sit here all day.
I didn't even know I had kids in my subdivision. I've been here for years, and it just blew me away the day I was leaving. I was like, where do all these kids come from? So we're in a completely different era. Something else, George, that should be noted is that I alluded to it just briefly. Is that we live in an age now where not all, but many African Americans have improved their plight. And so we have bigger homes, more money, and more cars, but we're still socially isolated. For example, I talk about it in one of my books. Very rarely do people sit down and have family dinner anymore. So I understand that everybody's busy. I get it. So my thing is at least one day out of the week, sit down and have family dinner. I can count on one hand the number of times that families, maybe white families too, I don't know, but particularly black families actually sit down and have family dinner. They don't do it anymore. If it does happen, people bring their electronic devices to the dinner table. So mom is texting, the children are texting. So you're there, but you're really not there. You're not mentally engaged. You see, people don't require their children to go to church or go to the mosque anymore. That was a social activity, a positive social activity. So the standards have are so low now.
It's a broad subject matter, and these are the things we need to talk about. But particularly that stigma about seeking mental health care in the Black community, and it's encouraging to hear you say that things are starting to change and people are starting to change the way they think about that. But once again, these issues shine a light on the underlying disparities in the accessibility of healthcare for many communities, and not the least of which is the Black community. If you don't have insurance, you don't have coverage, how are you going to get therapy?
Yeah, yeah. There are resources out here. You do have school counselors. You do have school mentors. There are quite a few programs in the community. There's a program that's been around for about 45, 46 years called the St. Paul Saturday Program for Boys. Used to be run by Keith Anton Willis, now it's run by a brother named Jay and um, Keith. That program was started by Dr. Harrison 45 years ago. I didn't mention this to you, George. I used to run a program called the Association of African American Role Models. I ran that program for over 20 years. Another program, Tahi Youth Group. Another program, Better Family Life. So there are the Urban League has a Save Our Sons program, which is very powerful, useful program. I send a lot of my clients there. So there are programs out there for people to get involved. Um, so people just have to reach out and just kind of express. You know.
Well, I didn't want to let you go without talking about some of your publications. Understanding the Crisis of the Black Male. Talk to us a little bit about what this book is about and why you think everyone should read it.
Well, let me kind of give it to you in a nutshell. Uh, I'm happy to say, George, that book is all over the world and is also an audio book. And another one of my books is called 101 Proven and Effective Strategies for Empowering Black Boys. And that book was written based upon my 30 years of being in private practice. And it's like a simplified version of critical things that should be considered, particularly when raising Black boys. Now, the principles that I expound on in Understanding the Crisis of the Black Male and 101 Proven and Effective Strategies for Empowering Black Boys, those principles are universal. They work for girls, they work for any population, but they were developed for African American boys. So I'll be real quick before time run out.
Sure.
A lot of times, George, I've been blessed to go to a lot of different universities and provide lectures, empowerment, encouragement, and so on and so forth. And a lot of times, for those of us who are public speakers, when you go and you give people a lot of information, there's a thing called information overload. They only retain so much. And so what I did, I developed the poster. And this poster, I'm sorry, is also all over the world too. And it encapsulates both books in these 10 little powerful points. And I'll read them real quick. Number one, black boys should maintain a healthy relationship with God. You won't find too many people that will argue with that. It's important to keep God as the center of your life. Number two, black boys should honor and always respect their parents. The Bible and the Holy Quran teaches you that, and it talks about that. Number three, black boys should embody greatness in everything that they do. As you know, George, we come from a rich history. We have a very powerful legacy, cultural legacy, and that too can empower you to achieve greatness. Number four, black boys should take pride in their history and their culture. Most of us don't know who we are. And the more you understand who you are, your culture, your place in the world, that can give you the pathway and direction to move forward. Number five, black boys should they should empower their community through leadership and service. It's really all about giving back to the community. That way your legacy lives on. Number six, black boys should be role models in their community. Number seven, black boys should honor, respect, and protect the black woman. Number eight, black boys should work to establish an economic foundation in their community. All throughout the community, we see others who are coming into our community providing goods and services, and that just should not be, because the same opportunities are not available to us to go in their communities and provide goods and services. Number nine, black boys should travel internationally to better understand their place in the world. I just came back from Puerto Rico yesterday. I had an opportunity to see many Afro-Puerto Ricans. There is 11 people of color for every one Caucasian in the world. I've been all throughout Africa, the Middle East, Europe, and you see people of color, Afro descendants everywhere, even in Brazil, over 80 million black folks in Brazil. And number 10, black boys should love themselves. So when I finish my lectures, George, I often give out these kind of posters. So when a child goes home and they say, hey, what was Mr. Muhammad talking about? What did you learn? You don't have to think. I just gave you a cheat sheet in those 10 points.
Absolutely, and as you go down that list, that 10-point list there, I can't help but think that implementing that is going to take strong black men, mentors, leaders in the community, people who aren't necessarily related to you, stepping in and lending a hand in that. I think back to the late Philip Jackson in Chicago with the Black Star Project, where he spent 20 years like, well, if you don't have a dad, the five of us who have jobs are going to rent a bus. We're going to pick you up. We'll take you to the museum on Sunday. You just have to step up and give it a try and be there for somebody 1 day a week, 2 days a week, whenever you can, if you have the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you summed it up beautifully. And that's really what it's all about. In my 25 years of mentoring young people, as I alluded to earlier, I started a program called the Association of African American Role Models. And I would often tell children that I can't be your father, but I can certainly be a role model. I can certainly be an inspiration to you if you allow me in your space and allow me to provide you with a sense of direction. And George, I think you said it earlier, it takes a village to raise a child. It really, really does. Your father may not have been there, but your uncle was there, or you had a second uncle, or you had your pastor, you had a football coach. And I think when we look at all children as our children, it makes all the difference in the world. We have to create a new paradigm of understanding in our head. And what that means is that when a child down the street is getting in trouble or being disobedient or doing the wrong thing, we can't just turn a deaf ear. It's called what I call the house on fire syndrome. As long as somebody else's house is on fire down the street, most people really don't care. But when it hits your backyard or it affects your child personally, you look at it altogether different. And so if we take that community approach, then we can achieve the goal that much faster. There's a saying that many hands lighten the load.
And, at least last but not least, we have to stay focused on what the goals are and where we're trying to go. We ran out of time here today, but, I know you're from Ferguson, and just looking at how everything in terms of what the goals were for Black Lives Matter when all that stuff went down in Ferguson with Mike Brown and to what it became this past summer, something's lost on me. I don't know what it's become, and I hope I can have you back on in the coming weeks or months to dive a little bit into where we're at since Ferguson and what's going on right now, what changed it, and why it's dangerous where it's going.
Well, that's definitely another subject for another time that we can expound
Yes,
on for extensively.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but
Well,
you know,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I want to leave people. I want to leave people with two things. And like, if you ever call me and I'm in a session and I can't really talk, my rejection message or my message when you call me is number one: the leader that you're looking for is right there inside of you. You need not look further. You need not look for others to validate you. Everything that you need is right there inside of you. So that's my message. Number one: the leader that you're looking for is right there inside of you. That was the first point. I forget my second point. Shame on me. Um,
Well, we're gonna have you back on again soon. I'm running over on time here, but I thank you so much for your
okay.
time today.
Okay.
For those of you watching the program who want to find out about all of the publications, all the books, all the lectures that Ajuma Muhammad has, you can go to ajumamuhammad.org. That's his website there. All the information is there. His stuff's available on Amazon and Audible, so make sure you pick it up. Ajuma Muhammad, thank you for spending time with me today, and thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week right here on Now. St. Louis.